How do I improve my lockout in the snatch?
Fixing elbow lockout or press outs in the snatch, there's a couple exercises we would do. If you're having trouble with snatching or locking out with heavy weights in the snatch, above 85–90%, I'd recommend doing things like drop snatches, snatch balances, and even snatch grip push presses, as this will help train the general strength qualities along with developing the position. If you're struggling to lock out just because of mobility issues, then I would suggest doing things like a snatch press from a squat, or what we call a SOTS press, and just snatch grip press from a standing position. You can also add in some remedial exercises, tricep work, bench press even, as long as it doesn't interfere with mobility.
How should I adjust my training if I get sick during a peaking block?
If you get sick during a peaking block, there's a couple things to consider. One is how sick that you really get. You know, if you have a little cough or if you've got, pneumonia, is going to create big differences in this answer. But what you need to do is focus on the number one goal of peaking, which is developing technical prowess. So even though you might not feel good enough to go in and do hard overloading training that would fit into a normal peaking block, you likely, unless you're very, very sick, which again is going to change this answer, but you're likely able to go in and do some reduced intensity technical work so you can stay in touch with the technique, so you're not decaying technique as you may be away from training for 3 days, 5 days, maybe even an entire week. Then it's going to depend on how far away from the meet it is, whether you just do that technical week and then do a little bit harder work during the taper, since you don't have as much fatigue to decay and need to keep fitness up a bit more, or if you can go back into another overloading peak week before the taper and competition.
How do I increase strength in the clean, past the knee?
To increase strength in the clean past the knee, one of the big things we're going to do is move the barbell up to doing pulls from above the knee or just below the knee. You can either do them from blocks or do them from the hang. Both of those exercises are really good in terms of developing the skill and the coordination past the knee, so you can keep your technique intact. At the same time, you can load them heavy enough that you can actually develop some strength. The next option would be to do RDLs, in which case you could load the bar even heavier and overload the muscles of the low back. Also, increased amount of squatting can help increase the strength above the knee. Primarily if your back is a little bit weaker, increase the number of back squats so that you're actually able to develop the muscles of the hips a little bit more.
When doing pulls, should I always pull the bar as high as possible or just a shrug?
When using pulls to increase the strength of the pull, doing high pulls versus doing regular pulls where the bar, you just maybe do a shrug at the top. It's important to note why you're doing that. If you're doing high pulls with your elbows coming up high above the bar, it's going to be more conducive to training the top portion, the final extension phase of the lift, and practicing that. You won't be able to use as much weight and execute the technique properly. So when you're doing pulls for strength, a little bit better to just do the shrug because you're not going to do much in terms of getting the bar much higher than your hip. In general, it's good to have a variety of different pulls and then pick the ones that target your actual weaknesses. If you have trouble at the top of the top portion of the snatch or the clean, do high pulls so you have a little bit less trouble there and more trouble with the actual strength development, then do regular pulls with a little more weight.
How should you train the week before a meet?
What to do the week before a meet is going to vary depending on how long your taper is, which will vary on how advanced you are, how big the athlete is, how much weight they're lifting, how experienced they are. So I can't give exactly specific recommendations, but the week immediately before the meet, the most important things you can do are decay fatigue and stay in touch with your technique. So you don't want to rest completely. You want to do very, very low volume work of the competitive exercise, ingrain proper technique, so maybe 3 to 5 singles, 60, maybe as high as 80% for the bench press on the lower side for the deadlift would be appropriate.
What does the cue reach mean to weightlifters?
I don't generally use the cue reach when I'm coaching athletes. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, as generally when the bar is over your head, you're probably trying pretty hard already. I think the intent of the cue for most people is to get people to try and extend their arms a little bit better and reach upward. For me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I prefer to just have my lifters become strong enough they can support the weight when they catch it.
I've been doing Juggernaut online coaching since September. And before I was just a CrossFitter strictly. I also do grid and I'm a barbell specialist, but I never got like any formal training in terms of my Olympic lifting. So once I started with Max, all my lifts changed tremendously. Just like the smallest little things have changed my lifting, and now I lift all of the weight. Since I'm remote, a lot of texting, emailing, mostly texting. Whenever I need any help on any questions, I just text him and he's really, really quick to respond back. I'll send tons of videos, and if he doesn't get them there, he'll always check my Instagram because I always post a whole bunch of stuff there. But he's always super honest and he won't like sugarcoat anything.